Good evening. Welcome to Coffee Time. This is a special evening segment of Coffee Time with a evening coffee mug. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, it says World's Greatest Grandpa. Well, if you think about it, we're all grandpas somehow, right? That didn't really make sense. Now, I've been in and out of Ecclesiastes a lot lately. It's one of my favorite books, or it's at least becoming one of my favorites. And I know one of you is probably going to say, oh, doesn't the book of James say something about not having favorites? Well, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have favorites. It's one that I like a lot. And the reason I like it is because there's this overarching theme of meaninglessness. And I love to talk about how Ecclesiastes tells us that life is meaningless. And you don't really get the whole picture until the end, when it talks about the conclusion of the matter. So, I'm going to read the end of Ecclesiastes quickly so that we have some framework to go from. But it's basically the end, chapter 12, verse 13 through 14. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. That's the conclusion of the matter. All right. Now, I'm going to be reading out of Ecclesiastes 3, 9 through 14. What does the worker gain from his toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on men. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for men than to be happy and do good while they live, that everyone may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all his toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that men will revere Him. So what are we talking about here? There are aspects of our lives that obviously make us happy. But when I went through this with the junior high youth group that I lead, one of them asked me, well, doesn't God want us to be happy? It's an interesting question. Does God want us to be happy? Of course He does. Of course He does. Why would He do anything in this world if it wasn't because He loved us and He wanted us to be happy? The problem is that we don't deserve happiness. We don't deserve goodness. We don't deserve anything, really. All that we deserve is eternal separation from God. Yet, because He loves us, He sent His Son to die for us so that we wouldn't have to suffer eternal separation from Him. But one of the greatest things about this section right here is verse 11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. God has set things into motion. In the beginning, He created the heavens and the earth, and from then on, everything is as He ordained it. Everything is as He planned it. And I love this verse because it tells us that God has set eternity in our hearts. So we have in our hearts a longing for something that we can't understand. This is why we have, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence or on the other side of the hill. The reason the grass is always greener is because we're always seeking something better. You could have a great meal, but you're still going to be hungry the next day. You can work up a thirst and drink cold, clear water. It could be the best water you've ever tasted. You're still going to thirst later in life. Here's the point, though. We have an eternity that's set in our hearts that we long for. We were meant for something so much more, and our sin has corrupted it. That's why we always seek more. That's why we always want the next best thing. It's why we're always longing for something that we don't have. It's because ultimately our hearts, our bodies want to be with God. Unfortunately, our flesh is sinful, and that gets in the way. And apart from God intervening and sending his son, we wouldn't have any hope. I was doing a Bible study with a group of guys. We're going through Revelation right now, as some of you may know. And one of the questions was, what was merciful about God banishing the Adam and Eve from the garden? Or I don't know if that was the exact question, but basically, kind of helping us to understand that it was a mercy thing. That it was God's mercy that banished Adam and Eve from the garden, because if they had remained, they would be immortal in their sin. And that can't happen. God can't stand sin in his sight. Like I said earlier, it's because we have a Savior who died for us and took on that sacrifice, so that yet, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, and we wouldn't have to suffer the penalty for our sin, which is death. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. My Bible study is finishing up in Revelation, and there's this glorious picture of what the new heavens and new earth will look like, and the new city that God brings down. And John writes this in Revelation to the best of his ability. He's trying to describe something he can't fully understand, and then we try and read it and try to understand it through his eyes, and which is even harder. And we can't even begin to fathom what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, what it's going to be like. But we know it's going to be good, because God has set an eternity in our hearts. So while on this earth, obviously, we have work to do, and we should take joy in our toil. We are stewards. We are not owners. God has given us so many things, but they're not actually ours. My prayer for myself and for all of you is that God will show you what your work in this life should be. That He would lay it on you, or reveal to you what your work, what He has set aside for you, what He has ordained for you to do. That's my prayer every day, because I'm still, even though I think I may have an idea of what I want, I'm still uncertain. And a good friend and brother of mine told me that when you're uncertain, that's when you have to be relying on God the most. Uncharted territory. You can't sail backwards. You got to sail forwards. When you're in uncharted territory, you got to trust in the Lord. Know that God has something special planned for all of us in this life and the next. Have a good night.